Hello and a very warm welcome to the Late Breaking F1 podcast presented by Harry Eade and me, Ben Hocking, as we review the Monaco Grand Prix. Folks, this is definitely the first time I've done this intro. I definitely wasn't on the wrong mic beforehand. You won't have heard it, but everything is going well here at Late Breaking HQ. Max Verstappen took race victory, so despite there being rain in Monaco, it didn't stop Red Bull from taking first place once again. Fernando Alonso in second, and Esteban Ocon claiming third for his and the team's first podium of the season. Harry, I know that Sam's not here. He'd usually be giving his anti-Monaco stance, but that was a pretty good race from Monaco.
Are you surprised? Obviously, Monaco's given a good race.
Stop it.
Yeah, it was. It was actually a decent race. And to be fair, it was, for Monaco standards of race, before the rain, I thought it was okay. I mean, drivers were just willing to chuck moves down the inside wherever there was like a gap. They didn't care.
Oh, look, there's a 3% chance this might come off.
Exactly.
Let's go ahead and do it.
I'm not sure what got into them all today, but yeah. Carlos Sainz. Lance Stroll, I think, tried an overtake on every single corner of the track on Kevin Magnussen. I don't think it was far off.
It wasn't limited to corners. I'm sorry, he's probably still trying to overtake him now, even though both ended up retiring.
He's giving it a good go.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then obviously the rain came and carnage ensued. But in typical Monaco fashion, we ended up with the same top three we started with.
Of course we did. That's the only way that race could possibly end. Coming up on today's episode, we've got moment of the race submissions coming up last. Does Monaco still have a place on the calendar? Does it still deserve its place on the calendar after what we saw this weekend? Sergio Perez, despite the fact that Max Verstappen took the race win, it wasn't a perfect weekend for Red Bull. Sergio Perez well outside the points. We'll be discussing what went wrong for him throughout the few days. And Esteban Ocon will be discussing Alpine a little bit more. But firstly, Max Verstappen taking the race win. He now holds the championship lead by 39 points. Of course, that was very close 2 races ago. It's now extended all the way out to 39 points. He beat Fernando Alonso very comfortably in the end. I think it ended up being around 27 seconds. But of course, it was in a little bit of jeopardy when the rain came out. A lot of uncertainty in terms of what strategy to go on. Whatever strategy was right to go on, Aston Martin went the other way. They went on to dry tyres, immediately realised that was the wrong call, and Alonso having to make a second, unforced, really, pit stop. Harry, did it matter in the end? Would Alonso still have been second anyway, or was there a chance he could have challenged him if he went onto the tyres that he questioned maybe what might have been the right ones?
This is in these situations when we have wet dry races. By the way, as we said before, fully wet races, overrated. Wet dry,
yeah,
bangers,
spot on.
But yeah, in these situations when the carnage is ensuing, these decisions are so split second that, you know, Aston Martin had put Stroll on the inters, and they weren't working. He'd done 2 or 3 laps, and because the rain at that point was just at like Mirabeau Lowe's section of the circuit, they weren't working. So I can see why they did what they did. If they had chucked him on inters, he definitely would have. He'd have come out somewhere near Verstappen. Whether he would have actually got out of head, he may well have done, but it was, yeah, I think it would have been touch and go. And as much as I'd like to think that, you know, he could have then gone on to one win from there, I think it would have been tough. So
would that have been your heart talking?
Yeah, I think so, rather than my head. Yeah, so it's such a tricky call, and if it had stayed like that and they stuck Alonso on those slicks and it stayed just in a concentrated area of the track, they could have looked like geniuses as well. So given with the position they were, him and Verstappen had built themselves that comfort of they could do this pit stop and still be fine. It was worth the gamble. Yes, it might have cost him, but again, I still think the gap was still pretty big to Verstappen when Alonso boxed. So you know, it's hindsight, isn't it? It's 2020, but I would. It's hard. I think it's really harsh to berate Aston Martin on it. Yes, it might have been a mistake, but also it could have been the greatest goal. And in the end, they took the gamble. It didn't work, but they could afford to take the gamble because he still came out P2 after it all. So a tough one.
It would be very harsh to berate Aston Martin for the call, which is why I am going to berate Aston Martin for the call. I thought it was a dumb decision, in all honesty. Not necessarily the decision itself, but the timing of it, because there would have been no real disadvantage, I don't think, to them doing the same strategy when they properly knew it was the right call. So he was going on from the hards to the mediums, and we know that those hards, at least versus what Max Verstappen was on at the time, which was the medium tyre, were doing better, as they would do after that much running. So why don't you just wait it out to see that you're definitely making the right call here? At that point in time, it is a real unknown. Should we go to intermediates or should we stick on the dry tyres? But the decision to stick on the dry tyres didn't need to be made in that moment. They could have waited another 5 laps to then see, okay, no, it's definitely inters, or, oh no, it's definitely dries. They were really in the thick of, we don't know which way to go on this. And at that point, they made the call. And I just don't think it was... It seemed like a snap decision where it wasn't really necessary. They could have waited a little bit. You know, if they had waited a couple of laps, they would have, at that point, been able to definitively say, yes, the intermediate tyre is the right call. And until they were certain on it, one way or the other, just stay out on the hard tyres. They could have stayed out. They could have stayed out with I know the rain obviously came about, but if it didn't, they could have stayed out until 5 laps to go on that hard tyre. No one was getting past Alonso. So I think they managed to force themselves into a corner when nothing was forcing them there. And yeah, it is split decision. I appreciate that. And they weren't the only team that got it wrong on the day. And I don't know whether Alonso could have won, but that gap was very close to 20 seconds with Alonso having done an extra pit stop, which is, roughly speaking, the amount of time you need. So it could have been very close. It's all about track position. So we can say after the fact that 27 seconds between Alonso and Verstappen means Verstappen would have won by a mile. But of course, if Alonso has track position, it doesn't matter how much quicker Verstappen can go. Alonso still probably holds on. If Alonso's in first place and he has track position, I don't care what Verstappen tries. He's not getting past. Alonso might be there he would use every trick in the book to make sure that didn't happen. So, I thought it was a bad call. Fingers crossed for Aston Martin, they get in the position again where they are challenging, but this feels like a missed opportunity. I don't know when the next chance will, maybe it's next weekend, but I'm not certain on when the next chance will be that they get an opportunity as good as this one today.
Yeah, I think that then maybe not going to come around as easily as that one every race, but you never know. I might imagine if he goes and wins in Spain, he won't give a monkeys if he won in Monaco.
Fair point. Yeah. It's just one of those where when you're leading the championship, you want every variable and every condition to stay as stable as it possibly can, because at that point you've got the pace to win. Here we had Monaco, which is in itself such a unique track, plus unique weather conditions. It works against everything you don't want as a champion, and it works towards everything you want as a challenger, and it still wasn't enough. So slight frustration there, I guess, that they couldn't make it work. What did you make of Verstappen's performance, though? Because we spoke briefly before hitting the record button. A lot of walls brushed this weekend, but nothing hit, nothing terminal. How impressed were you by his performance?
I know it's becoming a running joke that I say this a lot, but he is quite good at the F1.
He is, isn't he?
Look, I think the most impressive parts, I guess, of his weekend... Sector 3 in quali yesterday.
Jesus, man.
I guess that's the Sector 3 that he should have had in Saudi Arabia 2021, but actually this time he finished it off. I just don't quite understand how he did that Sector 3. So that for one, I think the early part of his race on the medium tyres where he just took off. I know Alonso was struggling with graining and actually started to come back at him just before the rain hit. But that first part was mental. I thought it was race over basically by lap 25. So that was impressive. And then actually after the, keeping on track, they all kept on track. How did they all? Some again gave it a good go. How did we have no safety cars? What?
I do not know.
I don't understand.
I think the only reason that we didn't have any safety cars was because all the crashes happened at about 5 miles an hour.
They were pathetic crashes. But yes, but his stint after everyone changed onto Inters, again, I thought at one point Alonso looked in the groove and he got it down to like 16, 15 seconds. But as you say, Verstappen ended up winning by 27. So he was pretty damn good this weekend. And I know there's a lot of comments about that it's the car, and yes, sure, it's a dominant car, but none of the traits of that car made him go that quickly through Sector 3 of Monaco. That was all Max Verstappen. And well, my dad said this, but a few years ago, he'd have ripped all 4 corners off that car trying to do that lap, whereas now he finished the lap. So yeah, he was mightily impressive. I think we might go on to this, but qualifying for me yesterday was one of the best qualifyings I've ever watched in my life. It was ridiculous. That was ridiculous. It was
utterly bonkers.
Esteban Ocon was on pole at one point.
I was there, like, finger over the keys of my phone, just like, I'm ready to type Le Plan. I'm ready to type Le Plan. And then, obviously, it didn't work out for it. We'll discuss qualifying a little bit later on, too. But, yeah, that was something special.
But, yeah. Max was insane. And it wasn't, like, all weekend, but it was just when it mattered, he was on it. And yeah, that's why he's 39 points ahead. Well, one of the reasons. The other reason is Sergio Perez can't do Santa Fe. But never mind.
We'll also get onto that one in a little bit as well. Yeah, that was a special weekend from Max Verstappen. Because you're right, it's not even necessarily the times or the outright pace. Obviously, they are impressive. It's the timing of when he needs to pull something out of the bag. Namely, Sector 3 on the last lap of Q3. Like, that's at that point, he needs to go 100% maximum attack. Not any of the other laps leading up to Q3, not even the first round of Q3. That's the point at which he needs to risk absolutely everything. And he waited until really he needed to and didn't do anything before that. He didn't over risk anything before that. That Q3 Sector 3, right? I don't think there was any one point in that sector where he wasn't more than about 1 centimetre away from a wall. Even the most incredible thing for me, actually, was not the most impressive, but it's as he's coming towards the line and how close he is to he's not even really doing a corner at that point, but to the inside of that wall, just to get as many thousandths of a second as he possibly can. Unbelievable. So he fully deserved the pole position. The race itself, he managed it as he needed to. And I think provided, if the race had stayed dry, obviously it'd have been on the hard tyre for the second stint, which seemed to be the better tyre. So I think he was fully set in that regard. Proving the point that I don't think the medium tyre was the better tyre. I know he gapped Alonso pretty well in that first stint, but Perez, up until the point that he caught the likes of Stroll and Magnussen and that lot, he cut into Verstappen's lead pretty quickly. So from memory, I think it was about 35 seconds when Perez came out of the pits and he went onto the hard tyres. He managed to bring that down to about 25 seconds, at which point he caught Lance Stroll and Magnussen, and it extended out to about 50 seconds in about 6 laps. But I think that just proves the point as well that he did a great job on those medium tyres and they weren't easy to manage. But I can't really summarise it any better than you did with the first thing you said, which is he's pretty good at the F1.
It's yeah, and I know I'm the head of the Fernando Alonso fan club, but Alonso's been on pretty ridiculous form this year, especially yesterday, and I was convinced that lap he did at the end of Q3, I was like, no one's beating that.
That's the one.
That's the one. And yet Verstappen still pulled it out of the bag. So I think that, I know Alonso's getting on a bit, but I think he's actually at a pretty pretty good place in his career in terms of performance. So that's doubly impressive.
Okay, we're going to take our first quick break. On the other side, we'll be discussing Ocon and Alpine's first podium of the season, and we'll also give our driver of the day and worst driver of the day. It's been a while since we've had a podium from someone who isn't a Red Bull, a Ferrari, a Mercedes, or Fernando Alonso. In fact, it's the first time since Imola of last year. So we're talking over 12 months when Lando Norris scored a podium for McLaren. That's the last time someone like an Alpine has managed to get inside the top three. But Esteban Ocon not only qualified there, he finished there as well. A lot of pressure from the likes of Carlos Sainz in the first stint and Lewis Hamilton in the second stint, but he held them off. Seemed to be pretty consistent throughout the day. And ultimately, Esty Besty's on the podium, baby! As said by Ocon himself. What did you make of his performance, firstly, Harry? And secondly, is there any chance that there is any repeats for Alpine this year?
He said Esty Besty's going to be on the podium, baby. That's a disqualifiable offence in my book.
Yeah.
Disgusting behaviour from Esteban Ocon. That aside, very impressed by him this weekend.
Mercedes have actually just lodged a complaint against that line.
Because it's awful.
Yeah.
But, he's excited. I might let it slide at some point. But for now, don't ever do that again, Esteban.
Stop it.
Stop it. Yeah, he was... Well... He took pole at one point yesterday. Didn't see that one coming. And from there, you had to think he was going to have a good race. And I enjoyed that I know they didn't get on very well towards the end of last year or last year at all, but he employed his former teammates' tactic of just backing everyone up. I'm not going to do anything apart from just back you up. Sainz tried to ram him out the way.
He gave it a good go, didn't he?
A good go, but it didn't work. But yeah, and. I know that's a Monaco characteristic, but he earned it on Saturday with that ridiculous lap he did. So that in itself is worthy of the podium he got. But I think the pressure on him all race basically. If it wasn't Sainz, it was Hamilton, and I think he kept Lewis Hamilton behind him in wet conditions. Now I know it's Monaco, but Hamilton closed up a couple of times, but Ocon's bridged the gap out again, and I thought that was...
Did the same thing in Japan last year, didn't he?
Oh, yeah, very good point. Yeah, so, I know it was Monaco, but I'd have thought Hamilton might have got past him there, even in the Mercedes as it is. But, yeah, I thought that was hugely impressive. Even with the Duff pit stop, they still managed to get out in front of Ferrari. We'll get on to them. No. But, yeah, Ocon was hugely impressive, and I know it's part of Monaco that maybe on pace they didn't deserve to be on the podium, but as I say, he nailed it in quali yesterday. And to be fair, both Alpines were pretty quick. I know Gasly wasn't quite as high up as Ocon was, but some better pace from them this weekend, so they'll be pleased. I guess they'll be hoping that's not just a one-off Monaco special, and then it translates into performance for the rest of the season. But yeah, very, very impressed by Ocon. It was a bloody top race from him.
It was indeed. I mean, the qualifying performance was brilliant. I think him and Gasly were fairly well matched throughout practice and the first few qualifying sessions, and it just seemed as if Q3 he managed to pull out those extra couple attempts to get him that provisional pole. Like you said, Gasly was impressive all weekend long as well, but Ocon seemed to have that very slight edge that gave him that provisional pole. And I don't know whether to call this unlucky. Unlucky doesn't feel like the right word, but Alpine played a strategy that if we had exactly the same as last year's qualifying, would have got Ocon onto pole position. They were banking on a late red flag, which at Monaco, more than possible, not only more than possible, it happened 12 months ago. They set their fastest lap time with a few minutes to go in the session. If anyone, Verstappen, Alonso, one of the Mercs that was going around right at the very end of that Q3 session, any of them go into a barrier, Ocon has pole position. So I appreciate, in hindsight, it's difficult to say, but I think they actually went ahead with the right call there. And just on another race weekend, even like if you considered last time out in Miami, it could have actually resulted in an Ocon pole. I was so ready with Leplan, but even so,
I was panicking. I was really panicking.
Le Podium, Le Plan, it did actually come through somewhat. I know it's been a few races into the year. Alpine are luring everyone into a false sense of security because Ocon is finally here to prove that Le Plan reigns supreme, starting with the third place. We're going to ignore that L Plan finished second, but Le Plan on the podium. What a great race it was. What a great race, because there were so many incidents, a lot of which we'll probably get into in terms of our worst driver of the day. There were so many incidents and crashes and going deep into Mirabeau and so many incidents against other drivers. Ocon, he was asked by DC when he was being interviewed after the race, hit any walls today? Nah. He must have been the only one that didn't.
Yeah, fair.
He just... Again, it's similar to Japan last year, but Ocon is just so solidly consistent when he needs to be. And this was a situation where he needed to be. He pulled it out the bag. Whether it is a one-off or not remains to be seen. My instinct is it might be, but I hope it carries on. And they can start to get into the fight, because if we can get into a position where, at least in qualifying, we could have like almost all of Q3 be a battle for pole. That sounds good to me.
Oh, yeah.
Because to your point, Harry, and again, we'll get onto this, qualifying was pretty good. That was good fun. And it's because we didn't have 2 drivers capable of pole. We had probably 7, which is great to see. Esteban Ocon deserves all the plaudits for this race. There have been times in the past where I've been harsh on him, and I don't think he's come out of his shell enough, and he hasn't lived up to some of the potential that perhaps he had in his earlier years of F1. But races like today prove that he is absolutely deserving of a place on the grid, and on his day, he can mix it with the best. He can mix it with the best. With that, should we review some bold predictions?
Yes, we should.
You're quite keen for this, which is the first time ever you've been keen for this segment. So let's review bold predictions. Firstly, Sam. Unfortunately, Sam can't be here today. We can blame the trains in the UK for that one, but we'll at least review his bold prediction, which was a 2-parter. Now, part of it was that Monaco was going to be the best race of the season so far, which I would have been more than happy to give him a point for. Unfortunately, he decided to add something on the end of it, which is that Fernando Alonso would also win the Grand Prix. So the opinion of whether it was the best race of the season or not is kind of irrelevant, because I'm pretty certain Alonso didn't win that race. So Sam remains on 1 point. This is where we might get more debatey. I said that there would be a strategic blunder that caused Charles Leclerc to miss out on positions or something like that. A strategy decision did cause him to lose a place to George Russell, but I don't know whether... Can we call it a blunder? I'm willing to... I'm happy either way on this one, quite honestly.
Is this because they had the double stack, right? Is that why?
Well, even that, they were out on the dry tyres after.
Oh yeah, they were the last.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
I don't know. It's close.
I'm reaching here. I want to be kind, but I just don't know if it's enough. Should we do a
It's
poll?
a strategic mishap for sure.
It's a mishap, yeah.
Is it a blunder?
I think they made bigger blunders than that race, and it didn't involve Charles Leclerc. I don't know. Do you know what? Let's say maybe. We'll come back to that. We'll do a poll.
So I may be on 1. I may be on 2 points for the season. Now, Harry, of course, on 0.
Here we go.
No more.
Thank you, FIA.
Yeah. Harry's now big friends with the FIA because it's only the FIA that actually managed to give him the correct prediction here, which was, of course...
Yeah, my bold prediction was 5 different teams in the top 5 in qualifying, and I thought I was going to be painfully close, but no cigar, after both Ferraris got in, were in the top 5, and Hamilton was 6th. But then, Charles Leclerc decided to do 3 miles an hour in the tunnel, and held up Lando Norris, which if they hadn't made, I'd have been fuming on on both points. A, that didn't get a penalty because it's a slam dunk, but B, because then it also meant my bold prediction was right. But don't worry, the FIA pulled through. They made the right call. And Leclerc got his penalty, which meant that Hamilton got P5 in quali. And there were 5 different teams. I'm on the board.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thinking about it, I mean, my bold prediction didn't include qualifying at all. But if it did, I think I'd probably be right. Because I think Ferrari here have actually cost Leclerc a podium in that he'd have been clear of Ocon if it weren't for... And I know Leclerc impeded Norris, but it wasn't... that's usually on the team rather than the driver. And then, of course... Yeah, if they'd pitted him a lap earlier, he's probably on the podium right now. Instead, he was not.
What a Ferrari.
Well done to the three of us, though. I think you got yours right. Mine is potentially right, and Sam's at least half right. So, we've had weekends where they have all been horribly wrong.
Yeah, I think this has been one of our best weekends.
Well done, us.
Well done, us. A rare W for the three of us.
Good old dub. Driver of the day. Who have you got?
I'm going to play the jingle.
Oh, yeah.
Where is it? Oh, God. Please hold, folks. This one.
The verdict is in. You're the driver of the day. You're the driver of the day. You're good at driving.
My driver of the day. Hard to look past Maxi Verstappen, isn't it? I'd love to give it to Fernando. I think he drove excellently well, but Verstappen was just very good. Ocon obviously is another strong contender, but I'll go for the obvious one because I'm going first. So Max Verstappen.
For once, I wasn't actually going to give it to the obvious one because I think I've given it to Max Verstappen nearly every race this year so far. Realistically, not quite a contender, but Lewis Hamilton probably couldn't have done any more than what he did apart from get by Esteban Ocon, but we know that overtakes are tricky at Monaco. And then realistically, any one of the top three could have won this. And I think the voting actually reflected that because we saw it pop up a couple of times where there was a percent or two between those top three drivers. I am going to give it to Esteban Ocon. I think he soaked up the pressure behind really well. In a day where nearly everyone made at least one or two errors, including Max Verstappen. He had that error at Portier, of course, but Ocon seemed to stay error-free, and that's what caused him to get on the podium. So I will give it to him. Worst driver of the day. There's a few contenders here.
There is. Bear with.
Get in the bin. Worst driver of the day. Bin. Worst driver of the day. You suck at driving.
There's a lot of contenders here, as you said. We could be here for a long time.
We could.
Oof, size large. Lance Stroll. Now look, before both weekends now, obviously Emilia Romagna didn't happen. This weekend I said he needed to step up a bit compared to his teammate. I know he
he listened.
No, I know he was unlucky in qualifying because he got damaged and that meant he went out and that's, your weekend over. But even before that, he didn't look like he was on the pace of Fernando, for being honest. So he's a strong one. And then in the race, he hit everything and everyone. Mainly Kevin Magnussen. K-Mag said, leave me alone. Stop.
Leave K-Mag alone.
The crash he had at Lowe's in the wet when he drove into the barrier and then drove into the barrier again is like, I've done that on the F1 game. Come on, Lance. So he's up there. Sergio, not great from you, son. All weekend, I guess, if you can count qualifying. Who was the other one I had on my... K-Mag as well. Why are you staying out of slicks?
Banter.
What you doing? What you doing, mate?
Pure banter.
It's a real tricky one. I'll go with Lance because he needed a good weekend and he had the opposite of. And I know some of it wasn't really his fault, but today was. I guess it's just pent up frustration. But I forgot his move at Lowe's on lap 1 as well.
Yep, that happened.
I forgot about that one. Yeah, all right, I'll go for Lance. Sorry, mate.
Yeah, you're right. There are a lot of contenders. There was some good driving out there today. There was a lot of bad driving out there today as well.
Oh, no.
To run you through the 4 names that I had written down on this, and there are a lot of commonalities between Harry's list and mine. Sergio Perez. Now, I appreciate Perez is, we very strictly give out driver of the day rather than the weekend. If it was the weekend, Perez might be even more of a contender. But in terms of the day itself, he did everything he needed to up until the point where he drove into Lance Stroll and caused front wing damage. And suddenly his master plan of pitting on the first lap and then not pitting again was completely and utterly undone. So Perez is definitely a contender for this. Logan's corporal, that wasn't good. When you get to the point where you are going around on soft tires and your team are training you in terms of how to deal with graining, your race hasn't gone very well if you're already at that point halfway through. It was not a good race weekend for him whatsoever. I'll throw another name that I don't think you mentioned in as well, Carlos Sainz.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Just poor, man. I mean, that move with Esteban Ocon. I appreciate late braking, of course, but that is another realm. Like, come on, man. That was never on. I think Martin Brundle might have referred to it as a 50-50. A 1090 at best, maybe. There was never a chance he was making that move work. I thought he managed the race poorly. But I am going to agree with Mr. Harry Yeed because Lance Stroll might have delivered one of the worst race weekends for a driver I've seen in a very long time. That was shockingly bad. Now, I appreciate some of the other performances outside of the top 10 weren't great. Kevin Magnussen and Sargent, to name a couple. But they're struggling for points even if they have a good day. You've got Esteban Ocon in third in an Alpine, and you've got his teammate in second place. It's not a great look when your teammate is in second place and you're struggling around, going deep at Mirabeau, crashing the car twice within the space of 5 seconds, trying a move on lap 1 around the outside of Lowe's, which might be the most ambitious thing man has ever done after trying to get to the moon in 1969. And there are others as well that I can't even remember. It was... How do you summarize it outside of it was awful? Apologies.
Not ideal.
Lance Stroll, but it was. He was my worst driver of the day. And the last one for now, big brain strat. What have you got?
I mean, Ferrari, people may be mistaken to think that I was on their pit wall today because they just, they could
make a mind.
Make their minds up. Box now, stay out. Box now, stay out. That for me is, that was terrible. I guess another contender is the Aston Martin decision to go on slicks, another set of slicks for Alonso. I'll go with Ferrari. I mean, this award was designed for Ferrari, and they lived up to it with that one. And I guess you can throw in that they just didn't pit the last ones to pit onto wets later on in the race. So I'll go for that because I think the signs stay out, pit, stay out thing that made me chuckle. So I'll go for that one.
So I've picked my big brain strategy for this. So generally speaking, when the track is dry, you want to be on dry tyres. And when the track is wet, you want to be on wet tyres. And if it's somewhere in between that, you want to be on intermediate tyres. Okay? I'll give you that one for free. Ben's top tips to F1. I hope someone from Haas is listening.
Oh, dear.
Kevin Magnussen was on hard tyres when you couldn't tell the difference between the track and the sea. Honest, the Lowe's hairpin and Mirabeau and that sort of area down to Portier was absolutely soaked. And there's Kevin Magnussen bravely trundling on in those hard tyres going at about 10 miles an hour. I appreciate the effort. I appreciate trying to do something different because they're where they are, there's not too much to lose. But there's a difference between trying something bold and trying something completely and utterly stupid. And they very much hit the second of those two. The worst thing is they realised their error, went onto the wet tyres, but Magnussen managed to make it just one corner from home before having a proper smash into the wall. That coupled with the Nico Hulkenberg penalty that they just forgot to serve.
I love that. If we just stay quiet, they won't notice.
And to be fair,
they almost did.
I didn't notice. I completely forgot. So well done, someone from the FIA, for actually being aware enough that they did need to serve that penalty, and they didn't. But yeah, maybe I should just extend it to Haas because, P17 and the DNF doesn't read well.
It's not a great look.
Not so much. We'll take our next short break. We'll be discussing Sergio Perez and his pointless weekend right after this.
Oh, no.
So whereas there was joy for one Red Bull, Max Verstappen taking the race win by a very comfortable distance, it wasn't quite as good on the other side of the garage. Sergio Perez, after a crash in Q1 of qualifying, started last place on the grid, and it didn't get a great deal better from there, ultimately having 5 pit stops and finishing P16 on the track, which of course led to absolutely 0 points. Now, of course, the championship leaders extended out much, much further in the direction of Max Verstappen. Harry, that was not a great weekend. Does the result reflect how poor it actually was? What were your thoughts?
All his work was, I guess, undone when he smashed it into the barriers at Saint Devote. I mean, that was weekend over. I know it got worse in the race, and his. We've seen it before. You people that start at the back in Monaco, they often do that switch to the hard tyre immediately on lap 1, and then just plod around for the rest of the race, waiting for everyone else to get out of the way and pit, and they might pick up a few points. It does work, but that still would have meant he'd still be far behind Max in the championship. So for Checo, this was all done, all undone, as I say, in quali. And it was game over from there. So I know he didn't particularly look like he had quite the pace to match Verstappen, but you got to be in it to win it. And it could have, he could well have been in the fight for pole, which meant he would have been in the fight for the win potentially. So he wrote himself out of the picture immediately in Q1. So it's not a great weekend for, as we talked about it so much in the preview about him being a street circuit specialist.
Oh, Sam is to blame for this. As soon as he uttered the words "Mr. Street Circuit,"
ruined it for him, and then he goes and does that. So, yeah, for Checo, it's that's going to be a painful weekend to watch back because he knew immediately that he was sort of sat in the car for quite a while, I guess, in disbelief that he'd done it. But he knew from then that it was game over. There wasn't, he had to hope basically for Verstappen not to score as many points, which is a weird one, I guess, for your teammate, but. That was his only hope. After that, he was never going to recover. So, bad weekend for Checo.
It's humiliating enough to be lapped by your teammate once. To be lapped by your teammate twice? Ooh, that's not a great look. This was, as you say, most of this was undone on Saturday because even if he hadn't crashed into the back of Lance Stroll in the race today, and let's say that Red Bull absolutely nailed the switch to the intermediate tyre later on for Perez, I don't think he'd have scored points anyway. I think he was probably... Maybe he could have got one of the McLarens for a P10 or something like that, but it didn't seem as if anything was more available. If we look at the race exclusively just for a moment from Perez's perspective, the first part of the race, he pretty much did spot on. I understood what Red Bull went for in terms of the strategy, in terms of pinning him straight away, and then hopefully undercutting a load of drivers ahead of him. I understood why they went that direction. And at least for the first 10 laps, it worked a treat because, as mentioned earlier on the show, he was 35 seconds behind Max Verstappen after the first lap and the first pit stop, he managed to get that down to about 25 seconds. So there was one point, I was kind of calculating it on the fly. There was one point that if everyone ahead of him had come into the pits, he would have landed in a net P3 at one point. The problem is, as soon as he caught up to Lance Stroll and, more accurately, the Williams drivers who were holding up Lance Stroll and later Perez, that gap then just extended right back out again. That gap to Verstappen became 25 seconds, and then soon enough, I think it was lap 15, and the gap was 50 seconds. I'm like, how on earth has that happened? And then you see the graphic come up to say that Perez is 3 to 4 seconds a lap slower than Verstappen. Now, in reality, Perez's pace was not that bad. It's just that with Monaco, you do get stuck behind drivers and you can't do much in terms of showing your real pace. It's why he was so quick before he caught up to those drivers. So in the race itself, up until the point where he smashed into the back of Lance Stroll, I think he did everything he could. Obviously, the incident itself with Stroll, which very easily avoidable. He almost was it Stroll again that he almost clipped a few laps before that?
I thought he drove into the back of Magnussen and then Stroll came.
Oh,
through.
sorry, was it?
But it was those three were all together like all afternoon. It felt like so.
Yeah, it could have been Magnussen. Sorry, but he had another near miss, didn't he? When he thought Stroll pushed him off. Which
that was another one. Yeah,
I'm not quite sure what he was on about with that, but yeah. So the race itself up until that point was okay. You're right. Qualifying was the absolute downfall for Perez. I cannot understand, and I appreciate I'm sat here in my room and not out in Monaco driving an F1 car. So if you want to say I don't get it, fair enough. But the risk factor versus reward there was no sense to that Q1 crash. He went way too hot into the first corner into Sandoval, right?
I was never stopping.
Never stopping. As far as I'm aware, I could be wrong on this as well. There wasn't a lockup, was there?
No,
it was just
too fast.
Yeah.
He might still be trying to stop, actually.
But why was he pushing so hard? His objective at that point was not even set a lap that's good enough to get into Q2. His objective at that point is set a banker lap quick enough that he's got a banker if he needs it. As we know, his lap time before that was good enough for P20 when the ramping up of the track all occurred afterwards. So at that point in the session, he's not even setting what will end up being his quickest lap of Q1. There's just no... With that car, with his ability, the risk versus reward standoff, the trade-off, just didn't make any sense to me. Now, we've already spoken of Verstappen's Q3 lap. He absolutely risked it in Sector 3 of Q3 on his last lap. But there's logic to that. Where was the logic to being so on the limit midway through Q1?
I don't understand. I've also just realised Alonso's only 12 points off him. 12.
That is too close.
That's far too close considering the car. Yeah. He should be worried.
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy to think. A couple of races ago, we're talking about is a championship effort on the cards for Sergio Perez. We're now looking at a situation where he is 3 times closer to Alonso than he is to Verstappen. That's with a second place that he got last time.
Yeah. Good one, Checo.
Oof.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, this... Do you remember, I mean, a lot of people are going to be absolutely unaware that we ever did this, but we used to do a racing league. And every time we went to Monaco, we'd almost do a bit of an internal challenge of who's going to have the most pit stops. I think Perez thought he was in the league.
Yeah, fair. That's a good reference there for the OGs. It's on YouTube. Yeah. Go and watch it.
I reckon about 1% will understand the reference, but that's what we're here for.
Yeah, we hear you.
In summary, 20th to 16th in the race didn't look good, and it was right to not look good because he wasn't very good.
Good. That's a great conclusion. I love it.
Are we all happy with that?
Yeah.
Good stuff. Let's get on to Monaco itself, because as we know, the three of us, to summarise our viewpoints on Monaco, Harry loves Monaco like it's his own son.
It is my son.
Sam hates Monaco as if
It's his son.
Sam was Harry's son. If that makes sense. And I'm maybe somewhere in the middle, possibly closer to Sam's point of view, but not quite as far as he is. Now, we've had some dull Monaco races in the past. Firstly, what do you make of today's race, including the rain, excluding the rain? Does it have a case to be the best race of the season so far?
I think I've already said this, but even excluding the rain, I feel like we're actually having and I know people will be like, yeah, but an okay race at Monaco is actually a dull race. But I was enjoying the race before the rain arrived because it was, as I said, we had some dive bombs, if you want to call them overtakes, but they were dive bombs everywhere, which was quite enjoyable. I thought the tyres situation was actually quite interesting, and I guess we never really saw that play out at the front entirely, but
more deck than usual.
Way more deck, but that allowed for some of the overtakes we saw. You know, when Sargent, who's not learned what graining is apparently yet, but he's working on it. But because of that, you know, we had some action in the midfield or the lower end of the midfield. Obviously, Sainz gave it a go, but it didn't quite work. So I was enjoying that, and actually, that strategy element, I was intrigued to see how that was going to play out. I think Verstappen still had it covered, but it was sort of ebbing and flowing, wasn't it? You weren't quite sure how that was going to pan out. So I was enjoying it. Obviously, the rain made it even more, it made it better. Just the carnage that ensued when that rain fell was great. I'm obviously going to defend Monaco till I die. I'm going to die on this hill. But for me, even the race aside, I don't care. The qualifying yesterday, for me, is why Monaco deserves its place on the calendar. And I don't, you know, I know people will say that it's, I say people, Sam, will say, will say, well, yeah, but what about, you know, the race? But it's such a unique challenge that you know, maybe qualifying maybe is the more exciting part of the Monaco GP weekend, but so what? It was insane yesterday. So I'm shooketh by it still. I just couldn't quite believe what I was watching. So for me, that alone means that Monaco still deserves a place on the calendar. Yes, the race was more interesting. F1 tyre deg makes good racing.
It's good.
For goodness sake. Come on. So, yeah, I obviously will defend it till I die, but I actually think there's justification. I think the Monaco qualifying alone is enough to keep it on the calendar. It's a ridiculous spectacle to watch.
Really random one. I was just thinking back. Do you remember where before the race started? It feels like 2 days ago, but before the race started, and Martin Brundle grabbed a quick word with the head of Pirelli, who I can't immediately remember the name of.
Yeah, everyone will start on softs. What are you talking about, mate? What are you talking about?
Everyone is going to start on the soft tyres. One person did, I think. It was Zhou Guanyu. So I don't think anyone else touched them.
It's a real worry. He's the head of Pirelli.
I just thought that was hilarious. Also, another random, completely unrelated point. James Vowles. Can we have him every week?
That man,
he is so far clear of everyone else.
He is
in that spot.
His brain is massive.
Big brain Vowles.
Yeah, BBV. Yes, I loved him having him on the Sky pit wall this weekend. Yeah, so for people who don't watch Sky or can watch Sky, they kept throwing to him a few times during the race and during qualifying. But his way of explaining things and how they happen. The one that got me was when they were talking. This might have been through practice, but Albon he shunted in Q1. In FP1, and then they were talking about how then Sainz shunted in FP2, 3. Anyway, another practice session. They're talking to him, and he's just like, "Yeah, that's totally different." Like Alex has gone away and decompartmentalized it, and his brain is massive, but he doesn't make you feel stupid, which is a massive, valuable character there.
I just think he adds so much more than the other team principals do in that spot. And that's not to say like James Vowles is better at his job, but just in terms of for the viewer, I just thought he was so far clear of everything we've ever had before from other team principals doing the same job.
I agree. When they have Gunther Steiner, it's basically Crofty doing bad jokes at him, and Gunther's like, "Go away." Otmar would rather be anywhere else in the world than talk to Crofty. You know, Christian Horner is Christian Horner. He's good TV. But you're right, James Vowles, the best one.
So there was actually two completely separate points from what we're actually talking about here. But anyway, Monaco in terms of its place on the calendar. So the race itself, I think, was pretty good. Now, in terms of the rain, is it a stroke of luck? Yes, it is, but, you know, it'll even itself out amongst the tracks, generally speaking. So, you know, it was... But I agree with you. Even without the rain, I think it was, for a Monaco race, very good. For a normal race, okay to pretty good, is what I'd probably say.
Fair.
I think a lot of it was down to the Williams drivers just holding everyone up and drivers having to try and get past. But there is a point in here that, and I don't think Monaco's the answer because I think it's too far the opposite end of the spectrum. But we do know what it looks like the other end of the spectrum, where that race, DRS passes, right? Perez is back into the top 10 within a matter of 5 laps. But drivers like Perez and Stroll, who are clearly quicker than where they were on the track, and even the likes of Sainz and the Mercedes, who were having to try and get past the Alpine, they would have been able to make those moves so easily with DRS on other tracks. Here, they had to work for them, and they had to analyze these situations and say, is the chance good enough for me here? Carlos Sainz had to try and chuck a move up the inside of Esteban Ocon when it absolutely wasn't on. There is no way he tries that move at any other circuit because he'll get DRS on the next straight and he'll just be able to get past before the braking zone. So I think there is a point. And I like I say, I'm not Monaco's biggest fan. And I think Monaco is too much the other way. But certainly, it was good to see drivers having to work for overtakes because they shouldn't be slam dunks. So I was happy to see that. I do think it was a solid race season, even without the rain. Of course, the rain added a lot more entertainment to it, but I think it would have been okay even without that. To your point, qualifying was electric. That might be my favourite qualifying session ever. I
Agreed.
Maybe there's one or two that are up there as well that I just can't remember because of, you know, it's in the short term, this Monaco result. But yeah, that was thrilling action for an hour. I do think that, despite that, I do think that qualifying, the point of qualifying is to act as the supplement to the race itself. So if qualifying is more entertaining than the race, then I don't think you've got the recipe for a brilliant weekend. I still think the race should be the number one source of the entertainment, which Monaco doesn't provide on a normal case. This has helped Monaco in terms of my opinion of it. If I still had to choose tomorrow, do I keep it or lose it? I'm still saying lose it. But if we can have more Monaco Grand Prix like we saw today, that's a step in the right direction.
I'm going to unceremoniously pinch someone else's point here, so apologies. But on your point about having to work for overtakes, but not necessarily getting them done, I'd argue it's 100 times more entertaining than having 100 DRS passes. So this point is nicked from Tom Bellingham from the P1 podcast, so I'll award myself a yellow card for this because we don't allow other podcasts on here. That's a joke. But he was making the point on their podcast that, so Ben, I'll do the same with you, unless you've already seen the clip. Seen this clip? Anyway.
I have not.
2016 Monaco GP. What do you remember about that?
The pit stop incident.
Exactly. Everyone talked about Daniel Ricciardo pit stop incident. 2016 Chinese GP. What do you remember about that?
There were a lot of overtakes.
The most overtakes ever in Formula One history.
Yes.
But can you tell me what happened in that race apart from lots of overtakes?
No, I can't.
Well, this is not my point, his point, but I agree with it. You can have a gazillion overtakes in one race, but actually, is it what makes it an entertaining and memorable race? People are going to shout at me for that, I'm sure, but I think it speaks to your point that it was more memorable than just having a slam dunk DRS pass. And as you say, Perez would have been back up there in no time, as we saw with Verstappen in like Miami, or we saw with him in Spa last year where he came from last. So I will die on this hill, but I think there is some merit.
I agree with the larger point. Like I say, I think Monaco is still...
It's an extreme example.
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't think it's the actual track itself. I think it's the size of the cars.
Well, look at a Formula E race around there. The cars are like half the size of a Formula 1 car, and you get some... Well, they overtake all the time, so...
Yeah. Did you watch... I watched Formula E Monaco this year, but which I seem to remember was pretty good.
Yeah, I didn't finish it, but they've done a few races around the full circuit there, and there's been a few belters, so you're right. I think I agree with you on that point. Also, we're going off on lots of tangents here. I think the enjoyment of this race was helped enormously by the fact that it was F1's TV coverage and not Monaco's.
So much better.
I mean, some really cool new angles. The helicopter shot, chef's kiss, love that. But we just saw the action when it was when it was happening. And I don't know, F1 don't always get that right, but for the most part, even if they missed it, because there was so much going on in that carnage, they still got the replays back up, and you saw what happened.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think I've said this before. It was going to be a pump the brakes, but I think Monaco has been done a disservice over the years. Yes, it still isn't the best race in the world in terms of entertainment, but I think it's been made to seem worse by the fact that TV coverage has been garbage. So hopefully that will stay. I think it will.
Quick one before we go to our last ad break. Rating the race out of 10?
7.5.
Same for me.
Oh, boom.
7.5.
Lovely.
There we go. We're in agreement. Yeah, pretty good one. And I think to Sam's bold prediction, probably the best one we've had so far this year.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, our last short break. On the other side, we'll be looking at our moment of the race, including some Discord submissions. Before we get into our lovely listeners' Discord submissions about what the moment of the race was, we will give our own submissions. So starting with you, Harry, what did you pick out? There are probably quite a lot to choose from.
There are so many to choose from. I actually had to start writing notes down on my phone because there was so much happening. I'm definitely missing some. Some absolutely vintage George Russell team radio again this race.
Spitting.
It's spitting, but the one that made me cackle the first time, which probably his first one, was I reckon Gasly's trying to back me up.
Why?
Unsure why. I'm like, all right, George.
What are you doing, Pierre?
Oh man, yeah, he was on top form. There was another one as well. The one about can you let me in front of Lewis, but I won't go 5 seconds in front of him. Oh, yeah, all right, George.
Negotiating, yeah.
All right, George. Yeah, so that one was good. The one that made me also yelp was Nico Hulkenberg into Mirabeau on lap 1.
That was aggressive.
Want to use your brake, son? That was...
No. The brake is called Logan Sargent.
Oh, yeah, sorry. When I watched the Logan Sargent on board, that was... he was fuming, wasn't he, Logan? So that was another one for me. And there's one more which I hadn't written down and I've forgotten what it is. Oh no. Anyway, there were a lot. I'll go for George Russell's team radio because it really made me cackle this race.
Yeah, my moment of the race that I've got written down here, very similar to yours. Chapter probably 50 of George Russell's radio negotiations. I love them so much. Any potential way that he can gain an advantage, he's on it. Baby Alonso. He is so on it in terms of ways that he can possibly gain an advantage. Honestly, it got to a point where obviously Leclerc was far too back. He was 10 seconds plus back, so it didn't end up mattering. But he was like, can I go past Lewis Hamilton? I won't go more than 5 seconds ahead, so that means that I'll still be in the position behind. It makes sense for the team. He was 4 seconds behind Lewis Hamilton. Do you really think... Sorry, I appreciate the effort, George. But do you really think that Bono's going to go over team radio and say, Lewis, just for the sake of the team, can you back up by 4 seconds and let your teammate pass? and he's got a penalty, so he promises he won't go more than 5 seconds ahead of you. I admire the effort more than anything in the world. It properly made me laugh.
I remember the other one, and it was just a screenshot, basically. But it's when Stroll and Russell decide they don't want to do Mirabeau. Russell reverses out and then just drives in front of Perez, and there's the shot of Perez, Russell in the air, and just behind in the like parked up is Stroll. Like, these are the best drivers in the world. This is amateur hour. It really made me laugh as well. There's been a lot of moments in there.
A lot of moments. If I can extend it to the weekend for just one moment, if you haven't seen it, I'm Martin Brundle speaking to an 89-year-old photographer in the pits. Great 1 minute of content there.
There's some good stuff. Some good stuff.
Should we hear what our Discord submitters have to say, though?
All right, then. Please hold. Just scrolling back. Right. You lot. Here we go. First up is Real Dad, who is actually back.
Yes.
Real Dad is back with full effect. Monaco 2023 moment of the race. My moment of the race is basically Magnussen and then Russell trying to take a shortcut in a dead end, which was rather funny. Maybe they need sat-nav in their cars or something, but there you go. James, yours?
My moment of the race is Lance Stroll literally playing bumper cars down just before the tunnel section. I mean, it is basically a go-karting circuit. It's so narrow.
There we go. Have a good one, guys. And Sam, wasn't a bad race, but know how you feel. See you. Bye.
Cheers, Real Dad. I just remembered another moment of the race for me, and I think it's going to come up, but Yuki Tsunoda implying that his team want him to crash.
These brakes suck.
All right, Yuki, do you want to do some adjustments? No! You're trying to make me crash. Okay. All right, Yuki. Right, next up is Hazard, who has got 3 friends with him, and they've had beer, apparently, so this can only end well.
God.
Right, boys, we've got 3 for 1 special in. Moment of the race, Callum.
The rain in it.
Alex, moment of the race for you.
The slipping and sliding.
JJ, moment of the race.
Magnussen staying on the drive. Got to pray for sunshine, haven't you?
Cheers, boys. Thank you.
Cheers, Hazard and friends.
Oh, I love it. The rain in it.
Rain in it. Next up is Skylar, so a lengthy one here.
All the people sliding off when it started raining.
Yeah, that was pretty good, Skylar.
Yeah, if anyone had missed that, that's all the people sliding off when it started raining. So cheers. Cheers for that. Next up is Hecty.
My moment of the race is when Crofty was talking about the assumptions that Haas was making about Sargent slowing them down to help Albon out.
Audible groan.
So painful. Shut up, Crofty.
He's probably not coming on now.
Was that another Did You Do? Surely not.
To be clear, the first one wasn't a didgeridoo either. I don't even know what that one was.
Right, next up is Tree Torn.
This is Tree Torn from the heart of Bourbon Country. I have 2 moments of the race today. The first is Beef pulling off the double denim. Never underestimate how difficult that is. The second was Yuki going deep into turn 5 when he realized he was set to finish P11 again and refusing that energy. Long live Monaco.
It really looked like he was going to finish either P10 or P11 yet again. Finally broke the streak.
Gave it a good go, didn't he?
Yeah.
Next up, SoCal Jen.
Hey y'all, it's Jen from SoCal. My moment of the race is when I realized Ben is 100% right that Aston Martin is going to lose second place in the constructors due to Lance Stroll. Way to go, Ben. You're always right. Join the Patreon.
That's a great point. That was possibly my favourite submission of all time.
Yeah, all right. Jen, please. What are you talking about? Next up is All Good Always.
Highly breaking. Well, another update to my last life update. Yes, it was South Korea, so you boys were spot on with your assumptions. Moment of the race, probably all the cars turning into a slip and slide when the rain started to come in, especially Lance Stroll. I mean, the yellow and green flags going on and off just proved that he was just playing bumper cars at this point. Love you guys. Love the podcast. Bye.
Bye. Next up, a couple more. Joys That Kill.
It's probably a tie between the two Ferrari pit stops, the fake ones on lap 21 and 28 for Sainz. I can guarantee some teams didn't think that they were joking because they're Ferrari, but also when Max was talking at the end of his race and the camera just slowly pans to Esteban Ocon, like cheering like crazy with his team, and Verstappen is trying to talk. Those are both great. Also, I'm a +1 vote on Sam's prediction because this race has been pretty good. You were saved by the rain.
It's a real shame that Fernando didn't win, Joy.
Yeah. Sam's love for the two-parter cost him here.
It's cost him dearly. I mean, he's probably watching the race as we speak now, fuming.
No, because he doesn't know that Alonso hasn't won yet.
Oh, yeah, fair point. Fair point. Anyway, that'll do... Oh,
no.
Oh, God.
Beef 500.
Beef 500 is here. We need to get a move on because it's going to start as soon as it...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Right, Beef, make it quick.
Hello, Beef has actually been out today, so I've only watched the race in bits. Life update, submitted my essay, been on the Flying Scotsman today, and I sat in a fire engine, so my morale is up again. But my favourite bit is we basically went from Boyfriend Beef's dad's to town, and my favourite bit was tuning back into the Grand Prix, seeing it was raining, not knowing what was going on, but it was so clear that Ferrari had pitted much later than everyone else and came out with a P6 and P8. Love that for you guys. Okay, bye.
Fire engine Beef.
Well, sticking with the number theme, maybe Beef 99. No, sorry, Beef 999.
Or 911 if we're talking about America.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, cheers for that. Thank you all for your submissions. There are actually loads for this week, so
yeah.
Sorry if you didn't make it on, but we were inundated, which sign of a okay race.
Indeed. Appreciate them greatly. You're right, Harry, that we've managed to time this almost perfectly.
Yes.
Because as we are saying this, we are 7 minutes away from the green flag dropping at the Indy 500. So we've managed to Monaco watch along, we've done this, and now we're going to go straight into Indy. Good stuff. Oh yeah, Sam can't do the outro.
Oh no, this is always a bad idea.
Where do we drive people to? Social media. That's a good place to start. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. Guess what? We're on all three of them. You can find us on all of those. Discord. You'd have heard the submissions today, and if you want to get involved in the chat going on there, the link will be in the description as always. Join the Patreon was a feature of at least one Discord submission. You can join the Patreon. We've got a number of tiers available to you.
5-star reviews.
5-star reviews. Leave us a 5-star review. We like those a lot, please. Unsurprisingly.
Yeah,
and don't worry, Sam will be back, who does these outros far better than myself or Harry could ever do them. He'll be back midweek, where we will, of course, be previewing the Spanish Grand Prix, which, of course, features the greatest Turn 1 in the history of motorsport.
I mean, more excitingly, the Spanish GP with the altered final corner. Let's go.
Let's have it.
Could be a good race. Maybe not.
Yeah. Well, it'll be good. Don't worry. So, yeah, we'll be back for the preview and, of course, the review of that in 1 week's time. Thank you very much for listening. I've been Ben Hocking.
And I've been Harry Eads.
And remember, keep breaking late. Sam, you're so much better at those.
Yeah, God.